Alright, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, the progressive ogre of MMA YouTube has struck again with yet another horrible take, and we are going to be covering it in today's video. In a recent video that he uploaded to his channel, he took it upon himself to defend Dagestani fighters, more specifically Usman Nurmagomedov, for his recent failed drug test. In this video, he uses multiple whataboutisms, multiple false equivalences to argue his point, and in his pursuit to point out the contradictions of others, contradicts himself on a number of occasions. I'm going to be breaking all of this down in the usual format, but first I want to give a little bit of background knowledge. So this is not the first Dagestani fighter to test positive. Let's just list a few of them, okay? Islamaphobic tested positive for meldonium, which increases and improves blood flow, was described as experts by a poor man's EPO, okay, as it offers similar side effects, allowing athletes to aid performance as well as recovery during training and in a fight. Zubara Tukagov and Ruslan Magomedov both tested positive for Ostrium, which is used for muscle growth. Usman Nurmagomedov now has tested positive for an undisclosed substance, but don't worry, guys. His manager, Ali Abdelaziz, super credible source, okay, says it was prescribed to him by a doctor and they just didn't seek out a therapeutic use exemption for whatever fucking reason, okay? Also, the state in which this took place, which the reason I'm pointing this out, it will become more obvious later on. California State Athletic Commission, okay? This is the same athletic commission that allowed John Jones to fight after testing positive for pulsing picograms of Turinabol or whatever it was, when Nevada wouldn't allow him to fight. They said, just pull up, boys, come through, no problem. Also, they are very lax compared to a lot of other states regarding certain drugs like marijuana and things like that. So my point is that a 6-month suspension coming from these guys might not seem like a lot because a lot of us fans are used to USADA suspensions. Considering it was from California with a $50,000 fine, it's a pretty big deal. Okay, so now what I want to do is what we usually do, right? I'll play a clip for you. I am going to speed it up, so I do apologize if he talks a little too fast in these clips. He just talks unbelievably slow, regular speed, so I speed it up to make the video a little bit smaller. If you need to, you can slow it down using YouTube slowdown function, okay, to hear him speak more clearly. So I'm going to play the first clip for you, and then we will talk about it on the other side.
There's been a large portion of the fan base that dislike these fighters for one reason or another, because they're from Dagestan, because they're Muslim, just because they're good, because they beat their favorite fighter, something along those lines. They portray this narrative when there's really not a whole lot of evidence to back it up. And you can't condemn an entire group of people because one person tests positive for a test. And on top of that, when you look at the test that happened with Usman Nurmagomedov and you look at the full information and you use your critical thinking, you're like, well, most likely he wasn't using an anabolic steroid. The information we have right now is that he did not. The punishment from the California State Athletic Commission shows that it's not.
All right, there it is, boys. We all just hate Muslims, man. We really just need to do better, check our privilege, and stop the Muslim hate, as if we were the ones that send death threats over YouTube and Instagram and things like that for not liking a certain fighter. Like, I feel so much better now that I know the reason why I criticize these fighters is simply because they are Muslim. Now, I will say this, and I don't know if people are going to agree with this or not. Do they maybe get more backlash because they are Muslim? Maybe, but not in the way that you would think. Not for being Muslim. So I'll explain. If you, as a group of people, and I'm not saying that all Muslims are like this, but I will give an example later on after I explain myself. If you as a group of people act all holier than thou, like you are the true moral arbiter of what is like true, right, and just and moral and all of this stuff, you criticize the way people behave, the way that they live their lives, the substances they consume, you will be held to a higher standard, and I think that should be the case. If you are somebody who is hypercritical of people who drink alcohol or consume drugs, and then somebody catches you in your off time drinking alcohol or consuming drugs, you're not only guilty of the initial offense, you are also guilty of being a hypocrite. So, for instance, you can't say congratulations on whiskey and salam alaikum, right? Khabib Nurmagomedov at the Conor McGregor post, or at the press conference, got quite upset at a reporter for congratulating Conor McGregor on his whiskey and then following up with salam alaikum to Khabib. Not okay to do that, but it is okay to do Austrian, it is okay to do meldonium, it is okay to do a whole host of PEDs and also still say salam alaikum, right? You should be held to a higher standard. If you are going to criticize people for what they do, for what they consume, the way that they act and things like that, you better not be acting in that exact same way. Otherwise, you are worse than they are, okay? That is what I mean by maybe they get a little bit more backlash than the average fighter. They tend to push their beliefs, their morals, and things like that upon other people. And you can't do that and then also be a hypocrite. It just doesn't work. Also, he goes on to say just one person has tested positive. Later on, he goes to say that a bunch of them have tested positive, but I just want to point out it's not one person. I just listed 4 earlier on, okay? So this isn't just one person test positive. Now the whole team's under question. This is, we have a history of multiple fighters from this region testing positive, okay? Then he goes on to say, use the full info and your critical thinking skills, and the Ogre comes to the conclusion most likely wasn't using an anabolic steroid. The info that we have right now is that he did not. The punishment shows that it is not. His source of info, his only source of info right now, by the way, is, aside from the fact that the Athletic Commission suspended him and fined him for testing positive, is Ali Abdelaziz saying, don't worry guys, it was a prescription, we just forgot to seek out a therapeutic use exemption, which is fucking retarded, dude. Like, that's on you 100%. At worst, or sorry, at best, you're just negligent, and you know what I mean? You should still be punished for that. But also, we don't have enough information or evidence at hand to strongly state, I think that this was a unfortunate situation. He wasn't doing anything for performance-enhancing use. And I truly believe that, because if that was the case, that it was prescribed by a doctor and it was just some, like, random medication that doesn't really have any performance enhancing benefits, why wouldn't they just come out and say what it was? Because they are refusing as of right now to tell us what the actual substance was, okay? So, and again, as I said, a 6-month suspension from the California State Athletic Commission, the same people that allowed John Jones to fight after testing positive while not suspending him, it's kind of a bigger deal than he's making it seem. The next clip I want to look at is...
And I'm sure we'll find that out. But these people who their favorite fighters are Colby Covington and Bryce Mitchell and, you know, Sean Strickland. And then meanwhile, they constantly hate on Dagestani fighters and call them boring and they're all cheaters. And they bring up Islam Makhachev's failed test from years ago that actually wasn't even really a failed test. These people are just haters and they want to...
All right, here we go, dude. Again, bad white Western boys at it again, dude. It's absolutely insane to me. In a video where he's trying to defend a Muslim's use of performance-enhancing drugs, he has to somehow shoehorn in Colby Covington and Bryce Mitchell. They have nothing to do with this whole situation. I have no idea why he continues to say these things, but he says that the people who are upset at this positive test are people that are fans of both of these guys, which might be the case for some, but definitely not everybody. And I don't even understand why they're getting brought up, okay? It's the Islamophobia claim is fucking mental. He will literally... He has to, like, I swear to God, he must have to sit in his room and go down the hierarchical structure of intersectionality and victimhood. And since these guys are all straight white males, he's got to go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and eventually he lands on their religion. It's just very strange to me. We can't criticize people if they are a certain religion, otherwise we're just Islamophobic. If Colby Covington were to test positive and people were critical of that, nobody would be like, well, it's only because he's a straight white male Christian or something. Like, that's just not the case. Nobody would point that out. Either way, dude. I wonder what, I swear to God, I'm not even saying this to be shitty, and I'm not trying to generalize all Muslims, but I truly do feel like Joey, the progressive ogre, is farming Muslim fans because he knows that they respond well when you are very nice and complimentary to their fighters, and when you aren't, they send you death threats, which is why he's done videos complaining about Islam Makhachev's pound-for-pound ranking spot, done videos complaining about how Khamzat Chimaev is the most underrated fighter, which might be one of the dumbest fucking takes I've ever heard in my life. He's done multiple videos on Islamophobia regarding Bilal Muhammad and things like this. I wonder what all of these newly found Muslim fans would think the next time Joey wants to bring up homophobia or any of those things. Do you know what I mean? Like, or, you know, the next time they see him freak out at a person like Holly Holm that simply says protect the kids from certain shows and story hours, okay? And then he goes on to say, Islam's failed test from years ago that wasn't actually a failed test. I don't understand what the fuck he even means by this. It's not... A positive test doesn't mean you, like, got an A on it. Like, I don't understand. The experts literally called the drug that he tested positive for poor man's EPO. It has performance-enhancing benefits. He used it. He got caught using it. Point blank, period. He got suspended. Like, I don't understand what the fuck he wants. And anyways, moving on to the next clip. Now,
blah, blah. And there's been people that have said for years, oh, the Dagestani fighters get to hide over in Dagestan, and they hide from USADA. Well, first off, there's been plenty of fighters that have tested positive from over in Dagestan. I mean, I don't have the full list in front of me, but there's been some fighters that have tested positive. There's been plenty of fighters. So if they're able to hide over there and not be able to be caught for PED use, well, wait a second, how did some of them get caught? There was even one fighter a few years ago, it was a heavyweight. He got banned for life.
As I spoke about in the opening, this guy tries so hard to point out the contradictions of others that it just goes right over his head when he contradicts himself. He basically just admitted that a whole harem of these dudes have tested positive, but it's also offended, hold on. It's also offensive, pardon me, I don't know why I butchered that word. It's also offensive that people call them cheaters, okay? Also, he tries to pull the whole, oh, well, if they're in the mountains of Dagestans, how did they get caught then? Because he claims that there's a conspiracy theory that fighters that live far away from where USADA would operate, typically, are harder to catch. This isn't a conspiracy theory. But also, I would argue, or I would expect, I haven't looked into it fully, I would expect that a lot of them got caught stateside when they come here to do their camps, like so many of these fighters train at AKA and things like that. They're probably not getting popped in Dagestan, they're getting popped in the States. You know? Like, it's fucking insane. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. Also, he continues to harp on this point, like Usman would have to be an idiot in order to fail this test because they know when they're getting tested. This isn't random drug testing like USADA. This is like the week of the test, they'll test you. You know, I'll just point this out. Maybe years and years of a certain form of breeding might help with a good hairline, not so much for IQ. Do you know what I mean? So maybe he is just really fucking stupid because forgetting as a professional athlete, a professional fighter no less, that you need to get a therapeutic use exemption for certain medications and then going and competing without getting that is pretty fucking stupid, okay? Pretty fucking stupid. Next clip, let's get to it.
And what's funny about this, and I hate to even use this example because I know people are going to think that I'm hating on this particular fighter. You don't hear me bringing up this guy's negative or this positive test. Sean O'Malley tested positive twice for, I believe it was Ostrine, I think is how you pronounce it. Well, guess what? Recently, his teammate Kyler Phillips tested positive for that same drug, okay? And those, there was no excuse. There was no, oh, well, I was prescribed. There was no paper trail to defend it. There was nothing. But you don't see those same people saying, oh, Sean O'Malley's camp's definitely doing it, even though multiple from his camp have tested positive for the same thing, even years apart. You don't see that, and that's actually...
Okay, there literally is, though. Again, the big bad straight white man of the Western world is at fault. Nobody criticizes Sean O'Malley for testing positive, which is just fucking bullshit. When it happened at the time, a ton of people were hypercritical of it. Everybody was talking shit about him. The only difference is that Sean O'Malley's fans, if you think he's going to lose a fight, if you think he's not the, you know, coolest guy in the world or whatever the fuck, they don't send you death threats, okay? That's the difference. It's just insane to me. He's just using whataboutisms to defend these Muslim fighters for doping. Like, well, what about when Sean O'Malley did it years and years ago? What are we talking about here, bro? Come up with a better fucking, more recent example if you're going to do a whataboutism, which is not an argument, okay? People were hypercritical of him. Also, I'll be honest, I didn't know of the Kyler Phillips situation, but it is funny that this guy is the same guy who put out a video being insanely critical of the UFC, saying that they were putting out North Korean-like propaganda when they decided to get rid of USADA. USADA's in charge of letting the public know about who tests positive and who doesn't, or who's been suspended and who doesn't. They rewrote their rules to say that if it's under a certain amount or the suspension is only a certain amount of time, they don't need to be public with it. So the same people that he was all on the side of is now complaining about unknowingly for them not talking about Kyler Phillips a little bit more than maybe they should have. And guess what, dude? If Sean O'Malley and Kyler Phillips both, who come from the same gym, have both tested positive for the same fucking steroid, I don't think it's an insane leap of mental gymnastics to say, you know what, maybe it is a team issue, right? Like, what about the Black Zillions? Does anybody remember that? Having 4 fighters from one specific region that all train together testing positive, like we do here with the Dagestani fighters, we're getting to Black Zillions level, okay? That's what we're at. And everybody knows and associates that gym with steroid use. It just is what it is. I don't understand how this is some crazy concept to him. Let's get to the next clip.
Get caught the week of the fight. So this whole entire narrative that, oh, well, Dagestani fighters are cheating and that's why they're good and that's why they win titles is just ridiculous. And the conspiracy theory about they get to hide from USADA because of, you know, they're over in Dagestan. Okay, maybe it's harder for them to get tested, but guess what? They get tested and some of them get found to be positive. So that just proves that whole narrative completely wrong.
This was the I already touched on this earlier a little bit, but he was calling it a conspiracy theory and then concedes that it actually is harder for them to get tested. So it's not much of a conspiracy theory, is it then? Do you know what I mean? It's a conspiracy theory, but also it does kind of happen. In fact, this can probably be explained away very simply, actually, like a budgeting issue. Do you know what I mean? USADA would be blowing a ton of budget on travel expenses and things like that on the off chance that maybe they catch one of these guys in Dagestan. They would rather wait for them to come stateside. This is like a known thing that fighters that fight and live out of the USA or the West in general, I guess, get tested a hell of a lot more than fighters that don't. The CKB guys, Israel Adesanya gets tested a couple of times a year, maybe. Do you know what I mean? Like, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just what happens, okay? And it's strange that he calls it a conspiracy theory and then concedes the point, yeah, it might be harder for them to get caught, but a bunch of them have been. It's like, well, maybe they're all just stupid then, Joey. I don't know what the fuck, like what you were saying earlier, okay? Let's get to the next clip.
Where's MMA fighting? I don't see MMA fighting. Where's MMA junk? Nope, they don't cover it. Because guess what? They are under the UFC's thumb. They don't care. They don't care. They're not going to cover that. Nothing to make Conor McGregor look bad. They're not going to cover that unless they absolutely have to. This man is talking about someone's dead relative because someone was prescribed a drug for an illness that he did not seek a TUE for, a therapeutic use exemption. And the MMA mainstream media is not using it. What an absolute disgrace.
All right. First off, dude, MMA fighting, he tries to accuse of being under the UFC's thumb and saying that they won't say anything negative about them or any of their stars, which is insane. That's literally Ariel Helwani's, like, outlet. That's where he works. They might be the most anti-UFC MMA media outlet that I could think of, aside from maybe, like, Bloody Elbow or something like that. But I don't understand how he's going to pretend like the company that Ariel Helwani is, like, the head of, not meaning he might not be the CEO or anything like that, but I mean that, like, he's the face of that company and he's going to pretend like they do whatever the UFC wants whenever the UFC wants. They won't say anything negative unless they absolutely have to, as if there weren't hundreds of fucking articles written about every single allegation that came against Conor McGregor. As if there weren't articles written about when he punched that old man in the bar. As if they're like, they will. I can't remember the last time there was a positive Conor McGregor article written by any of these media outlets, okay? Any of them. It's insane to me. I can't believe he unironically said that. He's upset, unironically upset, that the MMA media didn't do an entire story on a fucking tweet. And he calls it a disgrace. I would argue that MMA media reporting on a tweet from a guy who's been inactive for years would be a disgrace, okay? I'm sick and tired of reading articles that are centered and focused around the tweet of a more famous fighter. It's fucking retarded, dude. Also, Conor McGregor, in my opinion here, maybe he said it a little crudely, is trying to point out what I was talking about earlier. Steroids are haram. You guys push your values and shit out there. You're super critical of people that consume drugs and alcohol, and then your boys are popping for steroids. That's what I think he's trying to point out there. Maybe he could have said it a little bit nicer, sure. Maybe he could have not brought up Habib's dad, sure. But also, who gives a fuck? They beat each other up for money. I don't understand this shit whatsoever. Let's move on to the next clip.
Meanwhile, and this is the part I really want to harp on. Meanwhile, Conor McGregor left the USADA pool, randomized drug testing. He left the USADA pool for literally years and literally abused PEDs, supposedly under the ruse to heal his leg.
This guy, I swear to God, he's literally fucking retarded. You know, it must be really hard to think coherently when you don't have any ears and you can't think shit. There must just be like white noise going on nonstop in his fucking brain, okay, which might be why he eats so much. Maybe the chewing blocks out the static that goes on inside his own head. Either way, this guy is actually trying to act like Conor McGregor leaving competition, leaving the testing pool so that he can do the drugs that he needs to do to heal his bone properly is worse than somebody who used them during competition. This is the false equivalency that I'm speaking about. Conor, whether or not you agree with what he did that in the most moral possible way he could have. He didn't stick around, continue to do steroids, go to some island in the middle of buttfuck nowhere so USADA couldn't reach him, and continue competing. He removed himself from competition so he could do the drugs that he needed to heal his fucking leg. And he has to go through 6 months of testing before he's allowed to compete again. Whereas Usman Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, Zubara, fucking Ruslan, all these dudes tested positive during competition. That is objectively worse than what Conor did. Conor's not going to be on shit by the time he gets, or at the, you know, at least not to the point where it can be detected, when he's in competition. That's the best way you could have done it. Also, he tries to bring up Chris Weidman and act as though Chris Weidman did it the right way because he had to, because he doesn't get the same special treatment that Conor McGregor does. Fucking let me ask you this, bro. How did Chris Weidman look upon his return? How did Anderson Silva look upon his return? These guys, unironically, I'm not even a Conor McGregor fan. These guys want to see the downfall of Conor McGregor in front of our very own eyes, where he goes on some insane losing skid, where his leg breaks again. They don't want him to get better. They want him to suffer the way Chris Weidman has, the way Anderson Silva has. Had these guys done what Conor McGregor did, maybe we wouldn't have seen the horrific losing streak of Anderson Silva towards the end of his career. Maybe we wouldn't have seen Chris Weidman go out there and have his leg rebroken against Brad fucking Tavares. They should have done what Conor did. It's not his fault that nobody else has realized this was like a loophole or something that you could take advantage of. And again, he did it in the most moral way possible. He removed himself from competition so he wouldn't be competing while on all of this shit. Whereas something as simple as getting a therapeutic use exemption is too much for these fucking other guys. Like, get real, dude. He's also, this drove me the most crazy, I think, about any of these clips. Abuse. He keeps saying that Conor McGregor abused PEDs. I don't know if... Are you a fucking drug expert, Joey? You are not qualified to say whether or not he was abusing them. It is more likely than not he got these drugs prescribed to him from a doctor that was trying to help heal his 2 snapped fucking bones that almost popped out of his skin. Do you know what I mean? He's literally using them in... Every single steroid has a medical application. That's what they were created for, what they were intended for. They all have a medical application. The performance-enhancing side effects are just that, side effects. They can benefit you, but it's not that's not what those drugs are created for. Conor McGregor's, by definition, using them in the correct sense to heal. He's probably taking growth hormone to help, like, all of this shit. He's using them in the correct way. It's the opposite of abuse. The abuse is the misuse of something, the overuse of something. Like, you know, like you would call an alcoholic. They abuse alcohol. Somebody who drinks once every fucking once in a while or whatever is not an alcoholic, or not necessarily. It's the opposite of abuse. And he says this like 4 times. He's abusing them. He's abusing them. He's abusing them. That's not a term that you should just be throwing around for actual medical treatments, okay? And his fucking retarded audience are in these comment sections like, oh, I can't believe you're such a G, so many morals, just unbiased facts, all this shit. Thank you so much. It's fucking insane to me. He doesn't even know what these words mean, and he's using them, just throwing them around. They're like, if a drug counselor or a drug whatever, a doctor that specializes in the use of drugs, they would get really fucking triggered at him saying that, because it's not abuse. By definition, he's using them for their intended, like, the first label. You know when a doctor prescribes you a med and it's like, it's off-label use. It was initially intended, like gabapentin's an example. It was initially invented for people with epilepsy to, like, block the brain waves that fucking produce a seizure or something like that. I don't know the total scientific terms or whatever. And then it gets used off-label as a nerve medication, nerve pain medication rather, because the same receptors that it blocks in order to stop an epileptic seizure can also stop pain signals. You know, this happens all the time. Somebody using performance-enhancing drugs for the performance-enhancing benefit is the off-label use of them. Using them to heal broken bones so that when you go back into the cage, your leg doesn't snap upon a couple of leg kicks is the intended use of them. All right, let's look at this last clip now.
Ultimately, this dumb narrative that somehow all Dagestanis are on PEDs just because Usman Nurmagomedov tested positive for a prescription, it's just disgusting. It's disturbing. It just shows a lot of people hate certain fighters because of where they're from, and they all...
Bro is literally just, this drives me crazy. He's literally just taking at face value that this was a prescription. There's no evidence has been provided. They won't even list the drug that was in the positive test, and he's saying it unbelievably confidently. He might end up being correct, but not for the right reasons, because he's just so unwilling to criticize anybody that has, like, fucking any minority status, even though there's like 2 billion fucking Muslims in the world. It's insane to me, man. And as I said earlier, he can't call us all racist. because they are the definition of white. They are the whitest of white. They are definitionally Caucasian, right? So he had to go down the intersectionality list of the hierarchical pyramid of intersectionality and victimhood. He just went down to the next and the next and the next, and he landed on Islamophobia. It's insane to me, man. Gross. I fucking can't stand it. I'm so sick of people acting like if you criticize a certain person and then they have one of these immutable characteristics, even though your religion is not an immutable characteristic, but you get the fucking point. You are then racist. You are then some fucking form of phobia or whatever, dude. It's insane to me. These guys preach and preach and preach and preach about how you're supposed to fucking act in the world, how you're supposed to behave, the things you are not supposed to, and the things you are supposed to do. And then shit like this comes out. People have every fucking right to be critical of them. I fucking hate this guy. He's so dishonest. I didn't add as many, like, pokes and jokes in this one because this actually drove me fucking crazy, especially when you look at his fan base growing and you read the comment sections of his videos. You realize how many fucking idiots there are that watch this sport, and he's poisoning the well for all of them, dude. For all of them. There are plenty of reasons why you would not necessarily like one of these fighters that happen to be from Dagestan, that happen to be Muslim, and it could have nothing to do with their religion or their nationality or anything like that, okay? Fucking hell, dude. Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.